We talk hip-hop with a serpent tongue, no holds barred reviews and interviews, but it's all in fun. Chopping it up with some of your favorites and some you never heard of, to the Maximus. Banter laced with candor in our practices. Respect to the newbies and the greats, hot takes baked into this layer cake for the sake of the listener. Putting you on to the freshness, remember where you heard it, guilty or innocent, what's the verdict?
What's going on, everybody? This is Corban, the Serpent tongue Skipwith.
And Brutus Maximus from Rawside Hip Hop.
And you're tuned into The Verdict. How's everyone going today?
Dope, man. Great to be here.
Great. We have special guests today. If you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, my name is Jason Hunte. I go by the company man, TheCompanyman, MAN. Ain't no K's, ain't no A's, but it should be an E or nothing like that. I write about rap music. I talk about it on the radio, and I was inspired by my man Illogic with the Black and Mild. So I will spark a Black and Mild for this podcast conversation as well.
Oh, word. Hey, what's up? My name is Illogic from Columbus, Ohio. Rapper, poet, producer, photographer, videographer, father, husband, all around cool guy. Yeah, and I'm excited to be on the podcast, man. Let's get it going. Excited to be here with Justin and everyone.
Right.
So the reason why I brought you two on specifically, or asked you guys to be on, is because I couldn't think of two better people in doing their own thing in the industry, and my boy Brutus, to talk about lyricism. It's a topic that I think strangely controversial in the hip hop scene, and I think in music in general, but specifically hip hop. And I would love to get your guys' take on it. So let's get started from there.
I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I don't think it's controversial. I just think people have different ideas of what it is, because you have a lot of the newer cats that think they're the best lyricist in the game, but to what we consider lyricism, it's not necessarily in the definition that we have of it. They might think they could be the best rapper in the game, I guess, by whatever standards they want to put up, but I don't think it's necessarily controversial. I think the definition is just skewed a little bit.
Yeah. So the one thing I want to start off with, just to get the conversation flowing, is, Justin, this is for you. Do you think lyricism is a crucial factor for someone being considered the GOAT?
Greatest of all time? Yo, yeah, definitely. In my opinion. I mean, but I'm the type of listener I am. I'm a hip hop fan. I'm not really a music fan. Okay, so what that means is like the energy of hip hop as a culture, the competitive nature of all of the elements, the creativity and imagination from MCs on the rap side, we'll use, since we're talking about lyricism. That's what I gravitate towards, right? I don't just gravitate towards a song because it's a great song, right? I mean, I'll listen to it, I'll enjoy it, don't get me wrong. But the only thing that I'm critical of, the only thing that I've dedicated, truthfully at this point, my life to, looking at life through the lens of, is hip hop. And a huge part of that is the creativity, the imagination. For an MC, we'll say, for me, along with your cadence or your voice or your perspective or your storytelling ability, is how you do those things, right? And to me, that's where the lyricism comes into play, right? It's not necessarily always the depth or breadth of the lyrics. It's a lot of times just how you arrange them in a row. And for me, all my GOATs are 7 of my 10 GOATs are really good at both sides of that. And the other 3 are like Tupac and Scarface, which I'm no knock. They're not flipping words in the same way, right? And that lets you know the power and the weight of their commentary that they have on their own, in my eyes, right? But that being as broad as possible, having as many styles as possible, really caring about how you're delivering stuff, the literary devices used, all those things I put into lyricism, and those things are super important to me. Because otherwise, it's leaving a significant portion of what I consider most compelling about this genre of music or this art form off the table if you exclude those things. So I don't.
Yeah. It's quite subjective, isn't it? It's one of those terms in hip hop, and you know, it's all music as well, but most particularly in hip hop is that everything is so subjective. Whether it's your GOAT list, or whether it's lyricism, or whether it's beat choice, there's so many subjectives. There's not a definitive category that fits everything in that you have to tick the box for. So you're never really comparing the same experience as a listener to another listener, if you get what I mean. So that's the beauty of lyricism, is that people can interpret it different ways, people can see it different ways. But the beauty of music and art is that it's created and it's an experience for each and everyone to experience differently.
Yeah, I think that because one of my favorite rappers, probably my favorite rapper, is Pasta News from De La Soul. And as an MC, the way that he puts things, his voice, the cadence, all of the things that Justin was saying, all of that, without all of that, if he just had the words and he didn't have the delivery and how he said it and the way he said it and the emphasis he put on certain things, and it may not be, you know, the same for me, but all of that is wrapped up in the box when you think about, you know, whatever your GOAT list is, you know. And then on the other side, Jay-Z is probably one of my favorites as well, just because he's so good at what he does. And he says things that make you think. He has style, he has the voice, he has, you know, the lyrics, he has, you know, he can do all kind of things. And I think that's one of the things too for me, that when you think about the GOAT conversation, lyricism has to be probably the top thing just for me, you know, especially as an MC. You know, when an MC spits, the first thing, I don't care about the beat as much, which is why I never knock Nas too much, because the beats were okay, but without Nas, they would have been trash, you know? So, so him rapping on those beats elevated the beat because he was such a good MC and such a good lyricist. And he did what he was supposed to do over those beats, even though he could have picked some better ones at times, you know, but it never took away for me, you know, the him being in the place that he's in as an MC.
Yeah, you know, it's quite funny because as I was doing just a tad bit of, you know, research here and there for this episode, I was listening to the latest or the final Gangstar album, I guess, the one where DJ Premier had to, you know, add in most of the Guru, like obviously all the Guru bits. And on the song Bad Name, it kind of struck out to me, because obviously this was recorded in the past, but he says, think about it, what if bling never happened and the true artists were getting rich from rapping? It's just like, it's really interesting to me, because there is this stigma where it's like, unless you're a lyricist, unless you're a real MC, you know, you're not as good, you know, you're not as good, and you shouldn't be getting all the accolades as a lyricist. And I think it's that old school mentality, which I mean, you know, that's me. I've always focused on lyricism, and that's how I found you, Illogic. Back in the day as a teenager, I was looking for most lyrical rappers, and I discovered you and your Celestial Artwork, Clockwork album. But it is, like, I think it is a fascinating conversation to me, because, you know, you even find on Facebook these days, on social media, people are posting about, you know, like how they're sick of, you know, 32 bar song, you know, 4-verse songs. They prefer it shorter, you know, and it's just like, it kind of gets me, because I'm like, you know, most of the music I listen to has obviously 3 or 4 verses in a song, and for a generation to come in and like not like the same style, it's a bit hard to get used to, you know.
Yeah, well, for when I lately, most of my songs have 2 verses or 1. I rarely do a song with 3 verses these days, just because I've found that the audience has a smaller attention span. No matter how good the song is, it's, you know, it's hard to listen to a song for 5 minutes sometimes, when it has 3-4 verses and, you know, a bridge and you know, hooks and all of these extra things. I think that's one of the reasons why I forget the name of the song on Kendrick's new record, where he's arguing with the girl. What's the name of that song? Together. Yeah, Cry Together. Like, that's probably one of the reasons why that song took such a dip on the charts, because it's long as hell. There's no hook, you know, and people's attention spans aren't there to really, like, you know, they hear it once and it's like, okay, you know, I got the message. And, you know, I think in some ways it's good. In some ways it's bad, because I still have, you know, I still want to do songs, and I have done on my newer record that that'll be coming out soon. Like I have a couple songs that are longer, but I think for the most part, because people's attention spans are shrunken, then, you know, it kind of makes sense for the artist to make sure he has the maximum impact. And it takes time to learn how to have maximum impact in, you know, small space. You know, doing, you know, some of my songs are only 12 bars, you know, verses, you know what I mean? And doing that allows me to challenge myself to get my point across in a smaller space than, you know, if I had 32 bar verses, which is, you know, what I used to do back in the day in the late 90s when I first started. I didn't care, you know, but just trying to think about the listener and, you know, giving them maximum bang for their buck, and, you know, keeping them interested, you know what I'm saying? Keeping them, you know, listening.
Yeah. Do you reckon that's it's the mass consumption now, isn't it? Because of social media, obviously the accessibility of music. We're not all waiting till that Tuesday morning when new stuff would drop. You know, you're constantly getting this flow of music, and there's so much to consume, and there's a lot of quality stuff out there. But I agree with you there, Illogic, is that it then presents a challenge for the MC to now be able to be lyrical and to be able to convey a message and to be able to captivate the listener in a shorter space, whereas you would have had more time to be creative. So I think that also sharpens your pen a little bit too in being able to do that as well. And that's why we're seeing these, you know, 7, 8, 9 track albums, 2 or 3 minute songs, and that sort of thing as well. But I think, you know, that presents its own challenges. And I think you're 100% correct there, Illogic, is that being able to then change the way that you write and the way that you deliver your music for the people to be able to get that cut through is really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think the macro environment's always had an impact on how music is delivered, right? I mean, to your point in the beginning, Cords, when you were talking about how, you know, if you're not making money, people think of you as less of a lyricist. I'm paraphrasing, but it sounded like that's what you were saying. That to me became much more pronounced after 1995, 96. It was Bill Clinton signed this act, right? It was called the Fcc Act of 1995. And that allowed for, at least in America, that allowed for consolidation in the music industry and in the radio industry, right? So you had less companies that owned more outlets, more stations, more labels, right? So in 1996, like you could almost see this happen in real time, right? Because you have It Was Written, drops in 1996, and you have Stakes is High, dropped in 1996. Now, before 1996, Nas, De La Soul, Dre, The Chronic, Tribe Called Quest, everybody was kind of looked at as the same thing. You could find all their videos back to back on whatever video channels, you could hear their songs back to back on the radio station. After 1996, if you followed the Nas track, then you ended up with getting more Biggie, you end up getting more Puff Daddy, you end up getting more DMX, you end up getting more stuff like that. And if you follow the Stakes is High track, then that will lead you to Raucous Records, which might lead you to Illogic, which might lead you to Little Brother, which might lead you to a different way. So that's the macro environment, making it seem like the cats who are talking about certain things are the ones who actually deserve the most respect, when in actuality, it was, you can make an argument that everybody's either making the same money outside of like 5 guys, or the guys who are looking like they had the most money were making less. You can make that argument, but that's because of the macro environment, right? And I think part of the reason why we see shorter verses now is because it's easier to move on to another song, right? When I was growing up, I used to cut grass with my tape player, right? And so if I wanted to get to another song, I would have to hold down fast forward and get there. Or I would just have to suffer through the song, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? It was very difficult to skip, right? The CD player made skipping easy, but you could only skip through that one disc. Then you had to go change a whole nother disc. So a lot of times it's just easier to prolong the listen because you're cutting grass anyway. You're doing chores, right. You know what I mean? And so now you got the whole catalog of the world's sonic history available at the speed of a double tap, a single tap now, not even a double click anymore, it's a single tap. And so, you know, you're up against so much more that the technology has deemed it necessary in order for you to maximize your revenue in a lot of senses, because you need to have people play as much of that song as possible. That has an impact on your views, your streams. It has an impact on your revenue retention rate, where it makes more sense to make songs shorter. And when I think of that song, We Cry Together on the Kendrick album, all those fuck yous, kind of like a hook, right? I just think it's the wrong hook. Like, how many times do you want to hear someone scream, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you? Do you need to hear that? Because that's another thing I think really, to your point of logic, what I think is a great one, pushing yourself to say things in a more succinct way in a smaller space, and stretching it out other times when you want to creatively. But like, one thing that doesn't stay on the charts that long are conceptual songs, like songs that are too conceptual. You know, like, I mean, Kendrick's album, most of those joints are really conceptual.
Yeah.
And for me, this is the first, I'm a huge Kendrick fan, you know, so, and I've done a lot of coverage on Kendrick. I've been very praised, where I praise him all the time, right? He's one of my favorite rappers. But this is the first Kendrick album where 6 of the 18 tracks are one-time listens for me. So this is the first time I've ever had to make a separate playlist of a Kendrick album with just the songs I like to listen to, because the other 6 are too conceptual. Now, maybe they're too heavy, or maybe they're too niche or too nuanced, or maybe there's too much Kodak Black, I don't know. But there is a separate group on that album that are just really conceptual joints, right? And so once you do that, you might get praise from the creative community, but the general listener isn't in that zone as much, right? And that is part of one of the things that's based off of the macro environment we see today, right? Because if this was 20 years ago, if this was the 90s and we were still on tapes and CD players, it'd be very difficult to skip through that. So we're burning that affinity of that song into ourselves in a different way. Here it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not really in that zone, let me move on. And so the macro environment is always something that impacts music in general. Technology, it's a technology-based art form. And I think we see that post 1995. If you look at the late 80s, a lot of those are really short albums. Like those albums were like 8 to 12 tracks, you know. You go to the beginning, there wasn't a whole lot of hooks. Like Rapper's Delight, I'm not sure where the hook is. I know there's stuff they repeat, but I'm not sure where the hook is. But that's because it's designed to last the entire breakbeat. They just want motherfuckers to dance the longest. You know, that's what their measures of success were. Cats were dancing. They weren't worried about retention rate. They were worried about dancing. And then, you know, things evolve in that way. And so lyricism, I think, is one of those things that always evolves to what's happening in with technology and the macro environment.
Yeah, and to your point, like, people can curate their own playlists. People can curate what they listen to, so they can make the choice to take this song that's 5 minutes long and put it on their playlist if they really like it, or, you know, depending on the situation, depending on the mood, they can take a song, you know, they can take a whole bunch of songs that are just straight bars if they're in that mood. They can take a song, you know, take songs that have concepts and put if they're in that mood. And I think it's up to us as the artists to adapt to that environment without, you know, without losing our creativity, without losing ourselves, you know, trying to become something that we're not, but in the same breath, adapting to a point where we can still do what we do and be who we are, but maximize the listenership, you know, that is available to us. And, you know, as a lyricist, I want to make sure that I'm kind of touching everyone that I can with my music. You know, I want to make sure that I have something that girls want to listen to. I want to make sure that I have something that anybody can listen to, because, you know, it's not like I'm trying to do the old school formula where you got to have that one chick joint on the record, you know, or, you know, that's the single or it won't sell, you know. But, you know, I think that we all have experiences that can relate to multiple people. And as MCs and as lyricists, we have to figure out a way to relate to people in order to get our message out, and also, you know, to for our careers to be lucrative.
Because that used to be the formula, wasn't it? And I forget who said it, but it was like, you need to make one song for the club, you need to make one song for the ladies, and then the rest of the album can be for you. It was always the formula there to create the album that people would get.
Yeah. That's that Tupac formula.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Jay-Z mastered it. Biggie mastered it. The bigger artists, the artists that really blew up in the 90s, the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, they really mastered that formula.
One thing I want to get out there real quick is funny enough, the song We Cried Together is actually probably, give or take, my favorite song on the new album, only because it's so heavily it's so heavily intense, obviously, with the argument going on. And I actually personally like the chorus for one reason. The fact that it overlaps each other's swearing and shouting, it makes it feel real. Because, in the past, if you have a argument song, fuck you, bitch, fuck you. But towards the end of the chorus, it actually, you can hear them both screaming at each other together. And it's just, it makes it sound more real. Obviously, in the song, the Kendrick still sounds a bit, like Kendrick, but the woman is, I forgot her name, but she went hard on that track, like straining her voice and everything. So kudos to her. But, it's really interesting to me because one of my favorite albums, for example, is A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory. And, on that song, they have so many songs, that are small storytelling songs and, cool lyricism on that. But the production is so groovy. It's so banging that I could sit there and just listen to them talk about whatever, conceptual or otherwise, because the production's so strong. And it's just I'm sitting there bobbing my head and, they'll be talking about whatever they're talking about. And I think for me, even though I do prioritize lyricism when it comes to hip hop, at least, when it's paired obviously with a good production, with a good overall instrumentals and beats, I think it does help, absorb in even the most overly conceptual songs or overly lyrical songs because I kind of feel the problem is, especially we'll use Kendrick's new album as an example, there are so many production choices that I don't think you can just listen to when you're driving. You can't just listen to that casually. It's not a casual listen, and obviously it's not meant to be. But I feel like if he had chosen, I guess, more beats, kind of like Good Kid, Mad City or Damn, a lot more kind of easier listen instrumental wise, then I think it wouldn't have been as hard of a listen. But the problem is, obviously, Kendrick wanted it to be different. He wanted it to be a interesting experience, so he chose interesting instrumental choices most of the time. So I think most of the times when you have a rapper who's trying to make something different or conceptual, they're going to go out of their way to not sound like the rest. They're going to go out of their way 9 times out of 10, I feel, to make different sounds pop, different samples, different influences, just to stand out. And I think obviously in that context, it's going to be harder for the casual listener to just sit there and listen to it all the way through when there's sounds that, maybe they don't like at first listen or they're not used to, compared to either the mainstream stuff or what's going on around them. So I think, and obviously that's probably by design by the artist, but I think, that's just my 2 cents about it.
Yeah, Kendrick's in a lucky spot because he's already got the name and he's already got the following, and he's always got, he's got people waiting 5 years for that album. So he is lucky in that, he can put out anything and he's already got that established fan base. He's already got the runs on the board. Very hard for anyone without that level of stature to create an album that is so vastly different, that has a range of concept songs, because people will tap into Kendrick because of the name and because of his body of work, which is fantastic. But yeah, a lot harder for people that don't have that stature.
I think also.
Oh,
no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you got it. Go ahead. Go ahead. You got it.
Okay. Well, I think we're going. The conversation that starts really is then talking about classic albums, because if you take Tribe Called Quest is a great example. Tribe Called Quest, Phife and Q-Tip weren't the greatest lyricists, but they made records that had the entire package. So the raps were good. It's not like Q-Tip is, crazy bending words, and he's not Pharoah Monch. You know what I mean? But he knows how to ride the beat. He knows how to, fit in that pocket and make really, really, really good sounding music, which is why a lot of Tribe Called Quest records in the beginning went platinum and, you know, sold a bunch of records because they had a groove and you could just put those on and listen to. And even if you know, go into other classic albums like, you know, Jay-Z's The Blueprint, the whole package is there. The rapping is good. The beats are dope, you know, and I would consider Jay-Z more of a top tier lyricist than say a Q-Tip, you know, as far as just rhyming. But as far as the compilation of the records that they put together, they're all, in my opinion, on the same level as far as classic material. I can put on The Blueprint and then listen to Low End Theory in the same breath and feel, you know, the same love for the art that I feel when I'm listening to either. So having the entire package is a different conversation than just lyricism, because there's cats that are really dope lyricists that don't have that entire package, that don't have classic records, but you know they're a dope MC. So it's a different conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and on the Kendrick tip, I think Kendrick's lucky he made a Damn, to be honest with you.
Yep.
Like that's a huge album, pop album. It's a pop album ultimately.
He needed Damn in order to make his new record.
Exactly.
If he didn't have Damn, he couldn't have made, you know, the new record.
And he damn sure couldn't have taken 5 years off, pun intended.
Exactly.
And so I mean, like Damn's still on the charts. It's never left the charts, right? He won a Pulitzer for Damn, right? So what do you do after you have like a massively successful record and you're the first rapper ever to win a Pulitzer? Well, you go after the rest of the awards and you wrap up your deal and you now been an integral part of an iconic label, arguably the most successful independent label there ever is. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, I look at TDE and the breadth of things that they put out over the past 10, 15 years. And you get Section 80, Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, The Untitled Unmastered, Damn. Yeah, you let the kid do his art thing because he's clearly an artsy kid. And this isn't the first time he had an album that underperformed commercially, right? To Pimp a Butterfly didn't sell like that. Now, To Pimp a Butterfly had,
and that's my favorite.
Yeah, that's what, right. And that speaks to your point, Brutus, about like having such a hold on his audience, having such a hold on his fan base. You know what I mean? Because To Pimp a Butterfly, they went analog on that. They used tape, dumb expensive. They're pulling in all the old, you know, Parliament Funkadelic, P-Funk samples and things. Like, you know, there are a lot of concepts on that album. I mean, he's talking to Tupac at the end of that shit. You know what I'm saying? And then
it's a jazz record.
It's a jazz record. You know what I mean?
It's a jazz record. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's got a Negro spiritual on there now. It's got All Right. You know, that carried that record quite a bit. And that's very foretelling in terms of his 5 years that he took off since Damn in that regard. But when I hear this new Kendrick, I hear someone who's trying to get all of the big awards, right? Like this album might not sell commercially, but he's high profile enough to where it will garner very sincere Album of the Year nomination at the Recording Academy. Now, maybe most rappers aren't worried about that, but if I got a Pulitzer, there's only one way up, right? If I'm TDE, like why would Top Dog and them even greenlight something that ain't gonna sell no records? Well, Damn, still on the charts. Every time Kendrick does anything, Damn's gonna go right back up on the charts, right? And so what else hasn't been done, or have artists who've been in that position where they have earned the right to have as much creative freedom as they ever wanted? You know, which artists have chosen to do that and which ones have ever even been in the position to do that? And that's why I think it's so amazing about this Kendrick album, right? Like, one, he's earned the right to do this, but he was with a team that allowed him to do that. Because there's so many artists who've had some, you know, super creative vision whose label stonewalled him. Q-Tip's one of them. You know, the Kamal album was supposed to be, you know, this creative expression. And, you know, that one got stepped on. You know, if you can look at Lupe Fiasco's one of my favorite artists of all time, right? You know, he wanted to do one thing with Lasers, the label said no, and so that turned into a standoff. So we get to see some amazing things with Kendrick, and this new album, Mr. Morale, Big Steppers, reminds me a lot of where he's been before. And to me, reminds me so much more of things that like, you know, Stevie Wonder would try, you know, things that, you know, Michael Jackson Prince would try, because they had that much clout, they had that hold on their audience. And what else is really left for those guys after you sold all the records in the world? And in Kendrick's case, won a Pulitzer. You know, the fact that he stuck so much incredibly dense lyricism in that shit to do that shit too is what's kind of crazy to me. You know, like you really have to unfurl that joint. And whether that's good or bad is up to the listener, because to me, I ask myself this all the time. How good is any album or any project or any song if you don't want to listen to it?
Right.
I don't have to answer these questions.
Yeah, it's a good. That's a good measure. That's a really good measure, because again, if it's not palatable, it can be the best thing in the world. But if it sits on a shelf and no one's there to hear it or appreciate it, then you know what was the point of making the record? Do you think? Would you say, in your opinion, Kendrick is the poster boy for lyricism these days, or when you hear the word lyricist, you know, who comes to mind in the modern environment?
I think it's him. I think it's J. Cole. I think you know, Black Thought is getting a lot more praise. He's finally starting to get some of his due, because he's been one of the top tiered lyricists, you know, since Organics, you know, since the beginning. So, you know, I think, but right now Kendrick is that guy. You know, when when anyone thinks of that's in the hip hop, thinks of, you know, who has who's the rapper, the MC that, you know, when you think about the lyricists of the game, Kendrick and J. Cole are always the names that come up. And I'm not a big J. Cole fan personally, but I do like his music. But I think in comparison to Kendrick, he's different. And I don't think he's as good personally. This is my personal opinion. But you know, those are the names that come up. And right now, because Kendrick has a new record, he's the guy. If J. Cole dropped a new record next week, then, you know, the conversation would switch a little bit, because, you know, people, same as Kendrick has his name, J. Cole has his name, you know. And I think to piggyback off of what Justin was talking about, like Jay-Z is another one who, you know, 444 is an album that Jay-Z would have never made, you know, in the hard knock lifetime. You know what I'm saying? When Rockefeller was still bubbling, like that's not a record Jay-Z would have ever made, but he got to a point in his career where he was able to do whatever he wanted to do because he's Jay-Z. You know, no matter who thought it would sell, no matter what, he had some things he needed to get off of his chest. And he's like, okay, I'm going to make this record. And you know, I'm going to talk about my relationship. I'm not going to talk about drug dealing. I'm not going to talk about all of the stuff that I've normally talked about. I'm going to make this conceptual record for people to listen to and digest because I can. And also as an artist, I think he needed to make that record. You know, when you get to a point as an artist, especially when you get to those levels, sometimes it's difficult to maneuver the industry because you don't always make the records that you as an artist need to make and want to make, but you have to make what is selling and to keep your contract going. But when you get to a certain point, like a Jay-Z, like a Nas, you know, like where you can just do whatever you want to do. And as long as it's, you know, still on the level, it's going to sell, you know, because you have that name.
Yeah. You know, one thing I got to point out is because I love the 444 album. It's grown to be one of my favorite Jay-Z albums the more I listen to it, because obviously how skeletal, how raw, how different it is compared to his previous bodies. But a part of me, a cynical part of me, can't help but wonder, had that album of Come Out at All, had Lemonade not dropped, had the whole controversy of Beyonce not dropped. Because to me, on the initial listen, I thought to myself, this is just saving face for Jay-Z. After
I think
Lemonade.
it was a response. I think it was a response. And they probably had a plan. I mean, Jay-Z and Beyonce are not stupid. You know, like they know what they're doing. And honestly, I think it was a plan for them. They both probably as artists and as husband and wife talked about it, like, okay, I'm gonna make this record. You're gonna hear some things that you ain't gonna like. And, and Jay was like, okay, so basically they had a conversation about their relationship in public, but they did it through their music, and I honestly think that was a response to Lemonade, and it was kind of in the cards for both of them, and they kind of planned it out to do it that way. Because not too long after, was it after or was it before that they make the Carter's record? I want to say it's that. Yeah, I want to say it was after. So they're very smart business people as well as artists, that understand that they have followings, that they can do kind of what they want to do and what they need to do, with their artistic expression, but also utilize it and, make sure that it's something that fits in the grand scheme of their success as well.
And no one spoke about the elevator incident at all after that. You know what I mean? Because that was quite a narrative in a negative light. But all of a sudden, what was capturing headlines, all of a sudden wasn't that anymore. It was the two of them working through their relationship stuff. It was the Lemonade. It was the albums. It was masterful, in my opinion, to be able to change that narrative away from a negative to be really authentic and raw and open, and as much access as you'll ever get to megastars.
Yeah, because they said everything that they needed to say on both records. So there was nothing else for anyone else to say. They addressed everything and got that negative light out of it because they addressed the situation. A lot of artists and a lot of people that are in Hollywood a lot of times don't address certain situations, which is why things become headlines and stay headlines. But, as artists and as writers, they both had to get those things out. And, I consider, I know we're talking about hip hop, but, R&B, a lot of the soul music, like people that write songs are lyricists in every capacity. So I think Beyonce and her lyricism bag, getting her thoughts out and her feelings out, really made Jay-Z have to respond. And I think he made some of his best art to date in responding and getting into that emotional place and not worrying about, I need to make a single, I need to make a hit, just I need to get these songs out, and, however they land, they land.
Yeah, and I wonder if he would have made 444 if Magna Carta Holy Grail didn't sound so detached.
Yeah,
because that was also, I think it was a two-shot thing around that time with me. It was Lemonade and Magna Carta Holy Grail, and the Magna Carta Holy Grail was like art collector rap. He's still kind of on that on 444, in my opinion. He's much more personal, much more accessible. Don't get me wrong.
The beats are harder on 444 though.
Yeah, way harder. But he also is explaining how to buy art. Instead of just saying, "I got some art, y'all. Look how dope I am." He's like, that didn't work out. Okay. You too can have art, and this is how you too can have it. That's the more Master P approach to that kind of thing. So I think those, those are two touch points I always see. I always see Lemonade, but I also see Magna Carta Holy Grail. And then you buy a cell phone and you get the album early. I mean, it was just so far away. It was so far away from where the culture was and being able to connect with people in a different way. I mean, that was almost damn near a return to Money Clothes Hoes. Jay-Z, which is the first knock that people had against him in the beginning, whether that's fair or otherwise. That was a stereotype of what people saw when they saw him.
Yeah, one thing that's come to mind, because we're talking about lyricism, and Brutus, you brought up the question, who do you think of when you think of lyricism? And as of late, I think the one name that pops up more than ever, and and the question I want to ask all of you on your opinion on him is, what do you guys think about Jay Electronica? To me, that's what I think of a lyricism. Like, he's just 80% lyricism, like 20% beats. Like, he's a powerhouse in that topic, and I want to get your thoughts on him.
Well, the problem with Jay Electronica is that he doesn't release enough music. So he would be in that conversation on a regular basis, but his output is so minimal that, when he drops, people talk about him, but, with the way that social media is, it's kind of a flash in the pan. But definitely there's a lot of names that, I would think about when if someone asked me personally, and he's one of those. But I think when you start to ask, like, what do people, when you ask about lyricism, what do people, the first thing that come to their mind, it'll be a Kendrick or a J. Cole. It won't be a Jay Electronica, because Jay Electronica, he dropped one album kinda, you know, and then he dropped a bunch of mixtapes and singles, and, you know, has some of the greatest lyrics and lyric work, you know, I think in the industry, if you look at his entire catalog, including the mixtapes. But the reason that he doesn't come up is because he's not as active as the others.
Yeah, I always think about this Jay-Z and Jay Electronica album. You know, I don't know, maybe just growing up in a Black family, but I feel like when people get in trouble, they run to Islam. You know what I mean? And like, everybody was real mad at Jay-Z for signing with the NFL, and then like right after that, we get this album with Jay Electronica. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little. Maybe I'm just a little bit of a skeptic when it comes to certain things. But
no, that makes perfect sense, though. Makes perfect sense.
You get in trouble, you go find a Muslim. Then you good with Black people after that. But yeah, I mean, I gotta agree. I mean, I can't even imagine a world where Jay Electronica drops on the regular.
Right.
I just can't, you know. And I'm not sure if he will become more or less impactful if he dropped more often, because Jay Electronica also has some things that other people get called out on that he doesn't get called out on, right? Like Game gets called out for name dropping, right? All the time. To me, Game is one of the best lyricists there is. Like, I mean, as far as rapping, Game could rap, right?
Yeah.
Now, he's also really good at smoke and mirrors and playing the internet, so he looks like a punchline a lot. But he could rap, right? And people call him out all the time for name dropping. Jay Electronica be name dropping, man. He can't talk about anything he does without Wu coming out that beehive, or when he was over there with Nas, or he was over there with Hov, or he's over there. He's like doing all this stuff that we never see, and we only hear about the affiliations or the references he makes, i.e. name drops, in his tracks. And I don't think that is something that's bad in terms of, in comparison to the volume that we get from Jay Electronica, because I'm a huge Jay Electronica fan. I think he has he has more gravity in his bars and gravity in his voice than 97% of anybody else who touches the microphone. All kinds of positive things to say about him. But how long before he finds himself at the center of, a bunch of rage tweets, or comparing him or trying to dissect or tear apart his style because of certain patterns that he has. He has a lot of, like, he approaches verses, in my opinion, very close to identical, right? Very close to me. Like, we don't have a whole lot of them. So everything sounds like it's a monument. If you add more of that, then we'd really see the level of lyricism and skill that Jay Electronica really has, because everyone else is out here running. Everybody else is out here producing. Everyone else is dropping stuff. I'm not saying he should or he shouldn't. I think that the work he's put out is incredible. I think that there's so little of it, we don't really, he's been immune from certain things that other lyricists get hit with all the time.
That's right. And because he doesn't have the body of work, he's not in the consciousness all the time, and he's not gravely successful, there's no need to tear him down. And that's the difference, because he sort of flies under that radar, that pinch point between where you're really good at what you do and then you become really well known for what you do. And that's when you start to see that balance sort of shift. You never see any hate towards, and I'm just looking at your top there, you never see any hate towards Elzai, Skyzoo, any of these guys who are phenomenal lyricists. And then on the flip side, you've got Griselda, you've got Conway, and then you've got Flex talking to Conway about being a bars rapper like it's a negative thing. But early on, everyone was praising Conway for his lyricism. And now that sort of shifts over to a point where you're just a bars rapper with that negative connotation.
Yeah, I think with going back to Jay Electronica too, I think the thing about him that he's done, I think, beautifully is the marketing of himself, because Jay Electronica is like this mysterious figure, and he's created this thing that surrounds him that whenever he drops, you have to listen to his verse because you don't know when you're going to get another one. And each one, like Justin said, does sound similar, but the things that he says as a lyricist are so good that, you know, it leaves you fiending for more. And I think he's utilized that and utilized his relationships in order to create this myth around himself that he can still tour, you know, he can still go do shows, he can still make money, you know, as a featured artist doing a feature once a year. And once that feature drops, everybody's covering it, everybody's talking about it, because he's created this thing where it's like, it's a treat, you know what I'm saying? It's a special thing when Jay Electronica drops. It's like, you know, you don't get Thanksgiving dinner every day, you know, so when Thanksgiving comes, you know, you're excited about that turkey and those yams and, you know, whatever you make for Thanksgiving, because that's not the stuff you get every day. And Jay Electronica has created this thing around himself where that's what he is. He's like a Thanksgiving feast whenever, you know, he drops just a verse. It's not even a whole song. It's just a verse. Just the fact that Jay Electronica is on a song, a lot of people are going to listen to it just to hear that thing, because you don't know when you're going to hear him again.
Yeah, he's like Andre 3000 without the catalog.
Right,
know,
exactly.
Which is a beautiful magic trick.
Yeah,
I think, and to, you know, your point about Conway and Flex, right? You know, I think I look at that a little differently, right? I look at the fact that, because one, I mean, that is a pretty hilarious back and forth, right? Like, I mean, I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but Conway said that, hey, New York will never blow up again if we don't get the same guys off the radio. And then Flex ethered them. And so to me, it's so interesting because they are 40-year-old rappers, right? Which is amazing to me. I think that's the biggest sign that this age thing ain't the thing no more, right? But two, not them, Rick Ross, 2 Chainz, like this past 10 years of rappers, maybe 15 years of rappers got here when they were 30. You know, Kanye didn't get here until he was 28, right? And so I see that happening. But to me also, what I see is, well, when you're signed to Shady Records, when you're signed to a major label, when you are receiving, to your point, Brutus, so much critical acclaim all the time, but you're also in a major system. They're in the major pipeline. They have major access, right? And they still don't perform on the charts. Well, you've got Flex, who's the major radio DJ in the nation, who's seen everybody come up who was a bars rapper make that transition to making songs, who's seen Biggie do it, who's seen Jay-Z do it, who's seen DMX do it, who's seen all these guys do it. And he's talking to guys who are literally in that same system, Griselda, who haven't seemed to make that transition. I don't necessarily look at that critique coming from the fact that, you know, they blew up too much. I actually think that's a pretty fair critique coming from Flex about this particular group, because this group has investment, which is hard to get. I mean, these guys are on Def Jam.
Yeah.
You know, like they're huge within our culture. None of them pass the grandma test. Ain't no grandma know who Griselda is. Even young grandmas, they might know. I don't even think they know anybody in Griselda. The typical, unless it's like the 2 friends I have that I went to high school with who happen to be grandparents, like 40-year-old grandparents. I don't think 56-year-old grandparents know who they are like that. And I don't think it's predicated off of success necessarily. I think it's predicated on the opposite. Here are these guys who really have achieved something as a crew and a collective very rare at their age with their style from their region. And they're getting all the looks to promote this thing, and they want to talk shit. You know what I mean? Yep. I don't know if it's necessarily because of anything other than, that's the level that they're on. And so they have to be able to take that criticism because it's true. I mean, I listened to the last West Side Gun album 2 weeks ago when it dropped. I was ready to sink in. I was ready to get, okay, let's see what we on now. It's the same project. It's the same thing. There's only one song I like on it. It's like the second to last
Yeah.
song. You know, and so now they're wrapping themselves back into niche, which is great because they got a hold on their audience. But what are you even worried about what's happening on the radio for? It's not Flex fault at that point.
Right.
At some point,
It's
the
your
artist
choice.
has to show. This whole culture started off with bars, rappers, 90, 80, it was 60-40. At worst, 60-40. More like 75-25 to me. And the artists who are able to make that transition into making more palatable songs or songs that can go farther are the ones who end up standing the test of time. And we're still waiting to see Griselda do that.
You know,
I agree.
The one opinion I've always had of like Griselda, because I love Griselda, and you know, referring just to the latest West Side album, the one song that always gets to me, like, you know, is the song Danhausen, because that beat, it's just it's the weirdest beat ever, and but I can't stop listening to it. It's kind of a weird West Side effect. Like, here's these crazy beats that are fucked up, but I can't stop listening to them. So it's pretty funny. But
who produced that? Was that Conductor Williams?
Yeah.
Right. And see, that's the thing. That's what made that freaking Makami album so crazy. Who's another incredible lyricist. You know what I mean? Like, but one, he had beats underneath it that makes it easier for people who are not sure what's going to happen next. But two, he knows how to bend his flow. He knows how to to stack his conversation across anything. You know what I mean? That's lyricism. And that Danhausen shit, Conductor Williams, I hope he should be $1 million beat guy to me. I need more Conductor Williams in my life. Murs got a whole bunch of Conductor Williams on his new album. Let's see how that sounds. I know it's gonna be dope.
Yeah. And, you know, I was just gonna say, like, I've thought this because the first Griselda album I heard was Fly God is an Awesome God by West Side Gun, which I forgot when that dropped, I think 2019. And since then I've followed them religiously. And one thing I've noticed, and this is just me, I could be wrong, but to me, when you're comparing Benny, Conway, and West Side, I feel like, you know, West Side is obviously pushing the envelope production-wise. He's always, you know, looking for that extreme sound, that extreme loop, that extreme sound that no one would put on the album, because you know, there's a very distinct West Side vibe to his production. You got Conway, who since his mixtapes, the Eat Will You Kill, I think it was mixtapes. You know, he's evolved so much as a lyricist, he's evolved so much as an artist, and we can all see that from his debut album to his second album that just released recently, and how in depth he's going with his stories, his trauma, what he talks about. It's just heart-wrenching. But then to me, I've always felt like Benny, although Benny is, you know, obviously one of the more solid rappers like in the group, I feel like he's kind of the one that's kind of content staying in his lane, because he, you know, to me, he doesn't evolve as much as Conway or West Side, or he doesn't seem as interested as evolving his style as much. He's just the bar for bar rapper. That's it. The bar for bar rapper that can out rap anyone, or at least contend with anyone. But I don't see much progression from him, or at least from his the Tama Talk albums till now. It just doesn't seem like his ability has evolved as much. Not that I don't love him, but yeah, like among the three, I feel like Benny's the one that kind of is like, I guess maybe content with his lane, content with being the solid rapper of the group. And yeah, that's just an observation I thought of Griselda.
I think Benny kind of is the one that wants to be the big star out of the three. Like, I think it's a little different from what you said. I think West Side is content with staying in his lane. He pushes the envelope because he's able to stay. He's in a lane where pushing the envelope is what he does. So people are expecting it to be different. People are expecting it to sound kind of weird. People are expecting that from him. And Conway has touched on something inside himself as an MC, that he's using his platform in order to tell his story a little more. And he's still mixing it in with the drug talk, but he wants to tell his story. And I think Benny wants to be Biggie. Benny wants to, he wants to be that kind of star. And if you even listen to the type of production from, Tana Talk 3 all the way up to his albums, and even some of his earlier stuff, it's definitely gotten a lot shinier. You know, it's definitely like there's a lot more drums on his newer stuff than there was on his older stuff, you know, or at least more pronounced drums. You know, things sound a lot more commercial. It sounds like he's trying to get that radio audience. He's trying to make songs that they can play on the radio, even though he doesn't change much lyrically. He's trying to, you know, walk that fine line of staying in his lane as an MC, but also, you know, getting into that, you know, Biggie world where, you know, Biggie was able to, you know, drop songs like Juicy and, you know, things like that to cross over. And I think Benny is the one that kind of wants to do the thing to cross over. And the other ones are like, I'm cool doing what I do and people love it and that's good. And I'm gonna keep evolving in that space. I think Benny just he's the one that wants to be the star. And that's okay because he's really good at what he does.
Yeah, I agree. I look at, it's funny because I look at Benny as a Biggie type character. I look at Conway as like a Tupac character now that he's starting to explore that introspective side, and songs like Stressed are one of the songs of the year. And then I see Westside Gunn as the ODB of the crew. Like he is just, he's out there.
That's a great analogy. It's a great analogy.
That's funny. I mean, Benny even got Diddy on the record.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like I don't think Diddy would have been on a West Side Gun record, you know.
Great point.
Yeah. Hey, actually, Joey Badass has Diddy to start and finish his album.
Yeah, you know what's so weird about that album to me? You know, I'm a huge fan of Joey Badass, and super nice guy. Known him for a long time too. And you could tell. Now he and Kendrick did the same thing, right? They both took 5 years off, right? Joey Badass is one of those guys who has a hold on his audience. At least he had a hold on his audience, right? I mean, he had that whole pro era everything. I mean, that was a movement in itself, right? The thing that I think is really interesting about this in 2000, the Joey Badass album, one, I think he's rapping great. To me, he's rapping really great. But the Diddy part in the beginning, the Nas thing in the middle, and then the Diddy at the end, it's almost like a reintroduction to Joey Badass, which makes me wonder how big of an imprint he really made in the first place, in my opinion, right? I mean, it's not normal when you get someone's fourth album and then you got like Nas in there saying, hey, everybody check out this young kid, but he got years on him, I promise. His name is Joey Badass. I promise he's gonna be dope. Like that's a first album thing, right? It's like, there's an army, I think it's the second or the third 112 album, whichever one had Peaches and Cream on it. That's the one that was really weird to me because 112, Diddy did that with 112 on the Peaches and Cream video. The first thing you see is them introducing one guy and his name's on the screen, and another guy and his name's on the screen, and another guy and his name's on the screen, and the third one, the S, the L, the I, the M. It's like you're reintroducing who this person is to the marketplace. And that felt surprising to me with Joey Badass's album because I always felt like, you know, in the space where he's been, he's maximized it. I don't think he's far off if you're going to say who's the best MCs, Kendrick, Joey, and Cole. You know, like I can see how that argument could even come to fruition. I think that the other two are more prolific than Joey Badass is. But when they're introducing him like that, it doesn't necessarily feel like an upstream introduction to me. It feels like, you know, a downstream introduction, like a reintroduction. And I didn't expect that effect to come through on this Joey Badass album. But 5 years is a long time, and not everybody's Kendrick.
Yeah. You
know, before I go into what I wanted to say, it just reminded me it's like on the debut album by the Migos, Culture, the very first song where it's like it's on the album, but it has DJ Khaled. It's like new album coming soon before the buzzer. But it's like it's on the album. Why did you drop that? Like I get it on a single, but like before the album, but they left it on the album on the first track, and it's like, did you just forget to edit that or like the fuck? Like I don't know. Just it kind of reminded me of that. But
so the only way they're getting Khaled.
But you know, look, we've hit an hour at the moment, so you know, at the hour mark, I was just, you know, like I think it would be best if we just you know, like each of us go around the room and just shout out or promote anything we have going on, and let the audience know what's up. Brutus.
Yeah, look, obviously rawsidehiphop.com. We try to shine some light on some of those people that don't have big marketing teams behind them. So we're always, doing interviews, doing reviews, trying to just put people on to whatever's out there in a cool format. So that's what we do.
Cool. So yeah, I've got my my WordPress blog going on, Serpent94. I do reviews as well for any genre, any genre, metal, hip hop, or otherwise. Contact me on that website, and I'll get back to you shortly. I've got a metal podcast, Sagas, every Wednesday at midnight, and I do interviews as well. So if you need an interview, hit me up, and I'll be your guy.
Word.
Yeah.
All right, cool. You got it?
Oh, go ahead. Oh no, go ahead, Jess.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. I got a lot going on, so it's good to be active. It's good to feel awesome. I'm vice president of production and acquisition for Behind the Scenes Network. It's a brand new network. Me and my homies started it. We're currently available on Roku, on Fire TV, and we'll be on iOS later this year. And we're focused on behind the scenes content. Behind the scenes content is one of those things that lives adjacent to something, but there isn't a place where you can go find just that type of stuff. So we're looking at it from every angle. We're also licensing a number of different podcasts, a bunch of different documentaries that really look into what's behind the scenes of everybody's different favorite pieces of culture. So that's happening. I also work with Music 360, which is Barry Hankerson's music streaming platform that we just launched in January. And so Music 360, Barry Hankerson is Aaliyah's uncle. And so he used to be referred to as the Night Suge Knight, which is kind of funny. So we're building this platform. It's actually available on iOS now. It's the nexus between social media and streaming. So you can engage with your audience immediately, and also they can check out your music. We have access to over 100 million songs currently through our partnership with Apple Music. And in the couple of coming months, we'll just have access to them on their own as well. So make sure you check that out. Last week, I just dropped a piece on the 25th anniversary of No Way Out on Revolt. So go show love to Puff Daddy and the family's No Way Out. Really interesting story on that album. I learned some things I didn't know before. And so make sure you check that out. And then my own YouTube channel, The Company Man, where I draw breakdowns on Saturdays and different interviews. We have an interview up today that I produced with WWE champion Big E. His favorite album is this one, Below the Heavens, with Blue in Exile, to the point where he designed his wrestling singlets after that album cover, and the jacket he wore in the back has the track listing. And so this week is the 15th year anniversary of Below the Heavens. And so I produced an interview between Big E and Blue in Exile. So that's currently available today on the YouTube channel. Go check that out. And catch me on Wednesdays on Shade 45 talking about the latest in rap news, reviews, and memes. It's all happening.
Word. Let's see, what do I have going on? I have I have a podcast, Super Duty Tough Work, with me and Blueprint, that we drop semi-weekly. Things have changed a little bit. We used to drop every week, but it's been semi-weekly lately. I also have my own podcast. It's an interview podcast called The 5 Spot, where I interview different MCs and artists, and we usually have a topic that we talk about concerning, their specialty or, some things that they've gone through in their careers. And I have a new album coming out later this year called The Transition, and that will be available on all your streaming platforms and hopefully in your mom and pop stores if I can get vinyl in less than a year. But also you can check me out, Illogic 614 on all social media platforms, Illogic on all your streaming platforms for music, illogic.bandcamp.com for, to purchase music, physical copies. And also my website is iamillogic.com. So yeah, a lot of good things coming, and, more and more.
Nice.
I also want to give a shout out to Diabolical Fun. That was my favorite album from you, man. I think it came out like
word.
2000. Yeah. That was my joint, man. The way you opened that shit, what's it called? I think What's My Name was the first track.
What's My Name? Yeah. Yo, that's one of my most hated albums by my fans, ironically.
I
love that record. I love that record. So I'll let Il Poetic know that that's one of your favorites.
Word up.
Celestial Clockwork, shout out to that album. I think I can look for Brutus, like that's a classic. That's where I discovered you from. I still pump it to this day, and the song 1,000 Words, I still can't memorize that to this day. I've tried.
1,000 Whispers.
It is ridiculously hard song to memorize, and I've memorized, like I said, I've memorized Alphabet Aerobics and 100 Bars by Cannabis, but I can't memorize your song. So,
I'm not sure what that says about cannabis.
Yeah, fucking hell.
He's a great lyricist.
So the last thing I want to say is I think it would be good in wrapping this up to talk about everyone's favorite album of the year so far and why. Just to get a good idea to the listeners what they should be checking out and why. Brutus, do you want to start?
Yeah, look, we had a quick conversation about this last night, and it's so hard. There's just been so many killer albums. But for me, and the type of hip hop that I really gravitate to, the Bad Seeds 4 Finger Ring is insane. It's fantastic. He's one of those guys that can rap, and he's got great beat choice. It's palatable. It's only 12 or something tracks, but he's really talking. He's got a lot to say. And for me, I mean, there's been some brilliant albums, but for me, and it might be a little bit of recency bias there, but that's for me one of the best albums of the year.
Yeah. For me, it's, and I said this to Brutus yesterday, but for me, as far as the album that left the most impact on me, the most replay value, the one that just kind of burns into my memory just because of the direction they took it, how diverse they were on this album compared to their past discography, the fresh new take they had on this album. And for me, that's none other than Action Bronson's new album, Cocodrilo Turbo. Oh, however you pronounce it. That album blew me away because I've been an Action Bronson fan for a while now. And, it's pretty, his music up until this point, jazz rap and the lyrics are about cooking and food and because he's a chef himself. And that's what you normally expect from an Action Bronson album. But then come to this new album, and the only way I can describe it is a drumless jungle ASMR. It has barely any drums in it. It has a lot of jungle noises, animal sounds, starting the song, middle, end. And it's just a wild experience. And the lyrics are so refreshing because it's not his normal take on, I mean, there are food references there, obviously, but he's taken to a new route. He's got Conway on there. If I'm not mistaken, he had Rocky Marciano on there. Yeah. So, Rocky Marciano. So he had a lot of cool names. The diversity in the production was insane. I don't know. I'm just really digging the fresh new route, and hopefully he sticks to this formula because I'd love to hear more from him.
Well, I'll go. I haven't listened to a lot of the new stuff, but there's a local artist here in Columbus. His name is Trigno, and he's put out an album called I think it's called Wait Just Do, I want to say. But that's the only thing that I've really been listening to probably for the last 2.5 weeks, between that and my own music. But check out Trigno. He's a really dope artist from here in Columbus, Ohio. And I think he has the thing, So yeah, that's my record.
Well, I got two, and they're neck and neck. One of them is Lupe Fiasco's new album, Drill Music in Zion. Lupe obviously is one of my favorite rappers, but the thing with it is Lupe is always so conceptual. We were talking about concepts earlier in this podcast. So Lupe is so super conceptual. His last project was about superhero zombie slaves that come back to life. And this one, he made in 3 days, so it's much more train of thought, much more accessible. And it still captures all those great metaphors that we love about Lupe, but also doesn't feel like he got lost in the story he wants to tell, or the listener gets lost in the story that he wants to tell. Anybody who's ever had a problem with Lupe Fiasco, check this album out, because this is the one to me, it's a top 3 Lupe album, and it's just really impressive. And 2, the other album that I listen to equally as much as that Lupe album is by Homeboy Sandman, There in Spirit. And so it's a 7-track album, EP, I'm not sure what he calls it. And it's just amazing, right? Because I have a Homeboy Sandman album up here somewhere, and that's The Good Son. But Homeboy Sandman is one of these artists that over the course of his career, he's gotten so much better at saying more with less. And he's really able to maximize his production choices at the same time as maximize what he wants to say. And this is a much more lighthearted, uplifting, relentless lyrical onslaught, and it's just a beautifully mixed record, beautiful production with a lot of very motivational, uplifting, reflective commentary littered all over it. So There in Spirit and Drill Music in Zion.
Nice. Look, yeah, I just, this has been, and I said it at the very start, I think, before recording, this should go down as the greatest debut episode of a podcast in all podcast history. Like, we got 2 legends with us, and it makes it that much more exciting going forward for me and Brutus when it starts off so strong. So thank you guys for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here, man. It's a whole lot of fun.
It definitely was. So obviously, once I do all the
Wait, can I ask you one question, Corbs? I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So what is it about metal and hip hop? Like, where do they meet in the middle for you? Because you're the only metal and hip hop journalist that I personally know. I know people on one side, I know people on the other side. But where is the nexus between metal and hip hop for you?
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be that rare. That's so cool. But so for me growing up, my mom, she was the very pop R&B soul woman, and my dad was the 80s metal R&B as well, and kind of early hip hop. Like, we're talking Run DMC early. So growing up, I remember Saturday, spring cleaning day was Saturday, and we'd play the speaker out in front and blast it, and it would always be either R&B from Mum and Dad, Boyz II Men, Black Sabbath from Dad, and then some like Run DMC or some real early hip hop. So at an early age, up until my teens, I got to indulge in so much music from so many different styles from both ends, and I think that's what really not only grew my love for music, but had me appreciate all the different styles. So that going forward, when I finally discovered that my true calling is music journalism and music, like now I can enjoy all music equally because I grew up with so much around me.
It's dope.
Yeah. This is a great time. As soon as I do the bits and pieces, I'll send it to all of you. And thank you again for joining us. I hope you guys have a good day.
Word up.
Cool.
All right, that was the